And now to moderate our next must-do panel discussion, please welcome the CEO and co-founder of Conservation X Labs, Alex Dehgan, and his panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. What a great day of the first day of the 3 days of the Global Futures Conference. And we're in our second must-do, an immediate halt and reversal of nature's functions and diversity, of the loss of nature's functions and diversity. And we have three great panelists with me, three of my dear friends that are over here. First is Lucas Joppa, Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Managing Director of Wrigley Investments. Rodrigo Medellín, who is Senior Professor at Institute of Ecology, National Autonomous University of Mexico. And Dr. Patricia Wright, Distinguished Service Professor and Herrnstein Professor of Conservation Biology at Stony Brook University. I'm gonna start with a short presentation to kind of lay out the scene for what we're talking about today. And this is this idea of, there's a lot of argument as to whether we are in or approaching a sixth mass extinction. This is my wife, and she's actually in a mall that's filled with shark fins. Each of those bags probably filled with 30 shark fins. The smaller bags filled with hundreds of them. This was one of 100 such stores focused on wildlife products in China when we were there. And this was a great image. It was a graphic that was created in 2002 for the New York Times based on an opinion piece that was in the New York Times opinion section at that time. And it asked this question: are we in the middle of a sixth mass extinction? What is incredible to me is kind of twofold. First, if you look at the number of birds threatened with extinction, it is now estimated that BirdLife did a study of 11,000 species and found that 49% of them are threatened by extinction. So over the course of a decade, our estimates of actually the extinction risk for avifauna more than doubled during that time. In fact, increased almost 4 times. But the other piece that is important, we know that chytrid has affected amphibians. We know that mammals, right? These are all, for the most part, cuddly, well-loved species that we study to death. Even for lemurs, something Pat Wright knows a lot about, right? When I left Madagascar, there were something like 45 known species of lemurs when I left Madagascar. There's now estimated to be 114. Who knows the exact number now, right? So in a period of 20 years, we've doubled the amount of primates in a single country, substantially. This is the thing that scares me the most. So a more recent study has said of insects, right? They're estimating that 40% of insects, 33% of them are somehow threatened, 33% of them seriously threatened with extinction. But what we are seeing is a hollowing out of species, particularly those species that we're not paying attention to. And we should be paying attention to our pollinators and to the recyclers and the animals that are core to the functioning of the ecosystem. For us to get to 1.5, right, the purpose of this exercise, we need all members of the ecosystem involved, and that's why biodiversity is going to be critical for doing it. But the thing that scares me, and this is kind of the second point, is 0.3% of those insects have really been studied or cataloged. We are losing species before we even know they exist. And we know the factors that are driving that extinction: overexploitation, right? Just our overall use and what we're putting land to use for. 96% of the biomass of animals on this planet are humans and our livestock, right? Wildlife trade and pet trade and the medicinal trade are another factor in terms of what we're doing. Habitat loss and degradation and deforestation for different reasons. Invasives, one that is really not paid attention to in extinction, but if you actually look at the animals that have gone extinct on the IUCN list, it is the leading cause. Why? Because many extinctions happen on islands. And what are islands now? What most of our habitats are, what most of our national parks are, right? In terms of invasives, we know things like they're essentially a form of inadvertent wildlife trade, but what we don't think about is things like disease. This is a really interesting study that looked at at 5,000 mammal species and found over half of them to be carriers and affected by COVID, and 10% of them significantly so, right? We lost the snow leopards at the Bronx Zoo to COVID. We don't think of disease as an issue in animals and our plants, but it is as well, driven by things like climate change. And we ask this question, what happens as billions of people want more air conditioning, want more cars, want refrigeration within what they're doing? This is what Washington, D.C. looked like on June 8th from the Canadian fires, one of the factors driven by climate change. And just last week, we saw a case of Plasmodium falciparum, the cerebral malaria, in Washington, D.C. in someone who had not traveled at all, which is terrifying. Right? We know pollution from global agriculture, from our desires for technology, which have led to things like artisanal and small-scale gold mining and artisanal and small-scale mining for cobalt and tantalum are driving deforestation. #1 source of mercury pollution in the world as well. We know plastics are a factor of our planetary health. So what are the must-dos? We know protecting nature is a must-have. We decided that last year. It's an obvious one that is there. Perhaps why this is second in the roll-up. But what must we do to achieve it? And this is the thing we're going to be talking about, right? How do we actually think about the economy? How do we think about the increase in demand? How do we understand the interrelationships, because there is one, between the development challenges like the SDGs and the conservation challenges that we've had? We've put barriers between fields like global health, but there are concepts of landscape immunity that can help prevent spillover from happening through conservation actions. This is kind of the final question before we get into the discussion. Right? We lost Michael Soule, one of the founders of the field of conservation science. And conservation science was founded about 40-something years ago at a meeting in Santa Cruz, another meeting at the National Academies of Science, where the term biodiversity was coined by Tom Lovejoy. And it was founded as a crisis-based discipline and a solutions-based discipline. But the fact it hasn't felt like either, right? We spent a lot of time monitoring what species to protect and what places to protect, but we haven't taken the same level of evidentiary effort to think about what solutions would be most effective. And this is a conference about those solutions. Solutions that allow us to reimagine economies, reinvent products, change economic incentives, transformational technologies, restoration that we must think about. When we're thinking about restoration, which we'll also talk about later on today, how do we bring those processes back within what we're doing? So I will stop there and turn it over to a question I'm going to ask of each of my esteemed panelists, which is this. We started these must-dos. You know, we started this with a must-have, and we're now in the must-dos. And if I ask you, what is the thing that stands out the most as an action that we must take to put this into implementation, what are those things? What things have worked well in the past? What has not worked well? These are some of the most established conservationists I know, some of the smartest conservationists I know, definitely the most good-looking. Just look at them. And based on this, you know, what do we need to do? And let me start with Pat.
Well, first of all, I just got back from Madagascar, which is on the brink of extinction, where 94% of those lemurs may not last another 20, 30 years. It's an island, and we've heard a lot about islands. It's filled with incredible biodiversity. Do you realize that more than 50% of the terrestrial biodiversity in the world is contained in 4 countries: Indonesia, Brazil, Congo, and Madagascar? If we lose in those countries, we've lost incredible treasures that we can never regain. So I arrived in Madagascar being a research scientist. And I wanted to just find out what lemurs did, basically. And then suddenly I realized that that they were definitely threatened and in danger when the forest was basically being chopped up as I sat there. Then I realized something that I'm hoping that everybody else realizes, is that you can't really save the wildlife without thinking about the humans around it, without thinking of the communities. So for the very beginning, I realized that we had to work with them, and I asked them what they wanted. And they said they wanted health care, they wanted education, they wanted economic assistance. I mean, that's what you'll hear over and over again everywhere. Okay, I said, but I'm a research scientist. I can't deal with those things. And then I realized I had to, or else we wouldn't have any lemurs left. So we started an integrated program of working with all of these things together. And probably the most important part of it was capacity building. Madagascar had been isolated for a long time and has been behind academically about 20 years. So we had to help the professors and the students to get caught up to date on what the biodiversity was all about. All right, so that's one thing. Capacity building is really important. But there's so much more. I mean, it looks, you know, you look at it and you think, is this even possible? To really save these animals from the brink of extinction? And the only way I think that will work, at least in Madagascar and perhaps everywhere, is for everybody to be incentivized to save this extraordinary biodiversity. So one of the projects we've been doing is we've been doing kind of restoration ecology, but not like a traditional restoration ecology. It's taking endemic species of trees, planting them out, because, you know, 90% of Madagascar's forests and natural habitats have been destroyed. So we take seeds from the forest, plant them out, and then we make them valuable to the people in the communities. We put spices, we put black peppercorns, we have vanilla. Everybody knows Madagascar vanilla is very important. We put cinnamon in a cinnamon tree next to an endemic tree. We look at how these trees actually grow in the forest, and then we make them grow, and then we have basically agroecology. And that would maybe not work at all if you know Madagascar, because they don't have, the local people don't have you know, any warehouses to store these incredible spices. They don't have trucks to get them to market. They don't have the abilities to get these things to market, the international market at all. So if you're going to do a simple thing like incentivize them by giving them a product, you've got to think about all these other steps. And so it's so much more complicated than you might think. So how are we gonna do that? Well, not the way we're doing it now, because every funding agency wants to fund a different thing. You know, I learned that when I was talking to the people in the very beginning, because USAID gave us funding to make a national park when we discovered a new species of lemur, but they sure weren't going to help with education at that time. They weren't going to help with health. I had to put together a jigsaw puzzle full of funders. And then each funding agency wants different reports, wants different results, and you find that on the ground you have a lot of competition amongst the funders, and then the people are totally confused because there's different funders are giving them different signals. So one of the things, to get back to your question, one of the things that I would like to see as an action item going forward is that we don't give these individual grants, that we start a new way of giving grants that incentivizes every single one of those partners to make things happen. incentivizes them to work together, not compete. Incentivizes them to find solutions, make an impact together. Because I'm a research scientist, I shouldn't be doing, healthcare and education and all these things together. There are experts, so let's partner with them. We're partnering now with Catholic Relief Society. We're partnering with a health organization called Pivot. There's no incentive right now to do that, and there should be. The other problem is long-term. To gain the trust of the local people, that takes a long time. Can't be done in 3 years even. We've been working there 40 years, and I think we've got their trust, but only because over and over again, we gave them some value to that biodiversity. Ecotourism went from no ecotourists at all to I think we got about 50,000 before COVID. So what we need is a new way of thinking about incentivization, a new way of thinking of partnering and working together. All of this is interrelated. The Earth is, one big, wonderful planet. We have to work together in those small areas, but we also have to work together with other people, other countries, other projects, and share information. We have a tremendous amount of information, but we're not using it, are we, to help each other? And that has to change, or else we're gonna lose the whole planet. I keep thinking about, we're fiddling when Rome is burning. We can't do that. It's like such a beautiful, fantastic place, this earth. We have to work together to save it, together, interrelated understanding together.
Me next, all right. That reminded me of car rides with my dad. We were talking, your comments at the end about what a beautiful place this is, and I'd be reading in the front seat, and he'd say, "Put your book down, look around." I'd be like, "At what?" He's like, "The trees," and now I'm that dad, yelling at my kids to look at the trees because it is such a breathtakingly beautiful place, this planet that we live on. I will answer your question. I just want to belabor the obvious point just for a second at the top, which is what we have to do is no more complicated than what we already said we were going to do. We need to protect and connect species, their populations, and the ecosystems that they comprise, and we need to stabilize the climate that supports them. And we have agreed, promised to do that. We have international conventions that say that we are going to do that. So I just want to make sure that then when we start having these drill down conversations, we don't start losing the purity of our attention and focus that we need to keep. Before I became a conservation biologist, after I became a conservation biologist and before I became the software investor that I am now, I was a corporate operator. I was the chief environmental officer at Microsoft for over a decade. And we put in place very significant, sustainability commitments, which I was quite proud of, and I was quite proud to be able to help the company work towards. But the thing that I would always remind the board and anybody else who wanted to know what I was worried about was that the most important thing that Microsoft could have done and still can do on sustainability in 2030 is what it said it was going to do in 2020. And that is such a non-human thing to do. A, to do what you say you're going to do, and B, to maintain focus and attention for a decade. And that's what the world needs to do, that's what corporations need to do, and that's all I would hope that everybody here remembers as we go down kind of, okay, how are we going to do the things that we said that we were going to do conversation. Now, I'll get to my answer to your question, which is kind of a bit of an answer of why there's a software investor up here as well. I think fundamentally, if we are going to connect and protect the world's species and stabilize the world's climate, we are fundamentally going to have to understand what is where, how much is there, and how fast is it changing on this beautiful planet that we call home. And we live in the information age where all 90% of you are looking at your phones right now. I mean, trust me, mine's in my pocket. If I wasn't talking to you, I would definitely be. And even though I'm talking to you, there's still this little like primordial thing in the back of my brain that's like, maybe one of your kids texted you a new meme, So no harm, no foul. But, it leads you to believe that we know way more about this planet than we do. Alex kicked this off with a lot of, great statistics about what we know and don't know. But fundamentally, we don't know that much. I wrote a paper a long time ago called Flying Blind. This wouldn't be a panel of academics if we didn't reference our own papers up here. So, I wrote a paper a long time ago called Flying Blind. And it was just that, about how we were setting all these big goals, but we don't know anything about what we're trying to monitor or manage or model. And so for me, I bring a technology focus to this. I'm very fundamentally interested in how we use technology, and particularly digital technologies and software, to be able to allow us to scale the better management of natural systems. And we've been making breakthroughs. I mean, I love coming to these things where people are talking about nature-based solutions and trees, for instance, and you're like, well, how many trees are there, right? And if you went back a decade ago, you would have said that there were 8 times fewer trees on the planet than we think there are today. If you would have gone back, to 2010 and asked how many species are on the planet, you would have said somewhere between 3 million and 100 million, right? If you would have said just 2 years ago, how many people on this planet currently living today are at risk of sea level rise under a 2-degree Celsius temperature increase scenario, you would have been off by 4 times. You would have underestimated the number of people 4 times, and the reason for that is because we don't even know how high Earth is, right? So now we are making and using software and digital products in all of those areas to get better, right? The new estimates of 3 trillion trees come from advanced machine learning and satellite imagery. The new estimates of species diversity come from new advances in modeling. New estimates of number of people at risk of sea level rise come from new digital elevation models. All of this information that we are bringing into the conversation is helping us make better predictions and better choices. And then the last thing I would just say is that if part of the answer is to figure out how to monetize nature's services to humanity, then you have to recognize the fact that it's really hard to build modern markets on assets that you don't understand. You don't understand volume, you don't understand supply, you don't understand scarcity constraints, you don't understand attributes. So for me, fundamentally, I would love to see just much more focus on how we scale up the kind of digital discovery and dissemination of data about environmental systems. I believe that is the foundation of any management approach, whether that's a market-based approach, a regulatory approach, or an anarchist-based approach. I don't know, but we're going to need that data, and those data are going to come from digital software-based approaches. And so yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Alex. My turn, huh? I am going to have to put you in front of a mirror. I am going to shake the structure. Please look around you and look behind you, and you will find a room overwhelmingly full of white people, with very few honorable exceptions, including the Native Americans that joined us this morning here, and the gentleman from the Ecuadorian Amazon, and so on. I myself, I'm too much of a white person to be Mexican, but I am Mexican. I should be more brown. I'm not brown. This is, to me, what we must do. We have to stop gathering together in New York, wherever in the global north, and then coming up with these grandiose solutions and parachute them down into the global south. Thank you. Thank you. But this is only the beginning. We have seen this coming for decades. We've seen how the global south is disconnected and isolated. We come to our countries and we share incredible experiences, and we join this amazing spirit of linking with biodiversity. But then we leave. What's behind? For the past 10 years, I've been creating this network called Global South Biodiversity. We started, yes, Global South bats, because I'm primarily a bat biologist. But these Global South bats are connecting and empowering bat biologists in Africa, Asia, Latin America. We're exchanging ideas. We are not reinventing the wheel. Time and again, we come up with these solutions deep in the forest of the DRC. And then that solution is there, isolated. It's never connected to any other solution anywhere. I was just thinking, if those 4 countries that Pat mentioned, the DRC, Madagascar, Brazil, and Indonesia, were here, sitting here instead of us, just connecting those 4 countries in the global south would get us to the next level, to me. As far as I know, and I've seen it many times, I've been teaching and leading workshops and conservation courses in the Peruvian Amazon, bringing African professors to lecture to Latin American audience. Has there ever happened before? Ever? Nothing. That has never happened before. And you really see the glitter and the windows opening and opening and opening, and seeing, gosh, we share so much. We have the same challenges, the same opportunities, the same high levels of biodiversity, the same high levels of poverty. And yet we never talk to each other. So this is absolutely essential. This is to me what we must do. Now, I want to leave you with an idea that a colleague and friend of ours said only last week in Brooklyn, and I love that, and I fully believe in that. We are not here to stop something bad from happening. We are here to create the best future that the humanity has ever had. We have the technology. We have all of the evidence, the knowledge, the science behind it. We know what to do. All we need to do is to leverage it in the areas where it's most needed, the global south. Thank you.
I love these 3 distinct but also important answers that you have all given. You know, that this conservation, a must-do must be that it has to be Global South led, right? Not just participation, indigenous led perhaps, right? They're not just bookends, as we heard the call from this morning, right? That technology actually allows us to have better understanding that could then allow for involuntary transparency, that could allow for changing corporate behaviors, that allow us to out those bad actors who are out there, that could allow for people to actually understand what to do, which we heard from Catherine Hayhoe this morning, right? That the biggest problem is people maybe don't know what to do. And we heard Pat talking, and I call her Pat because she was my undergrad mentor. She was the reason I went to Madagascar as an undergrad. She was a member of my thesis committee. She is the one person, one of the most important people to inspire me over my life. So I apologize. Dr. Wright, I would say. But I heard Pat talking about the challenges of funding for conservation, the integrated way that we need to actually do conservation. And all of these, I think, are critical because actually the health of people depends on the health of the ecosystems. Two questions to you that I would ask. One is, right, if we are successful in implementing conservation strategies, creating new solutions, changing, right, helping, we ask those who are closest to the problem to bear the greatest costs, even though the demand is coming from the global north within what we're doing, which is also part of the problem. There's a bit of hypocrisy to stand up here, right? Even if we are successful, how do we make it politically proof, right? How do we make, God forbid, but another Trump election or a Bolsonaro election or a Ratsirika, I forgot the name of the disc jockey continues to win in Madagascar. Ravalomanana does not win in what we say. How do we make these things last? And the second is, how do we make it relevant to the bulk of the economy? If you guys could, if you could take on this question.
Well, first of all, our incentives are just reversed from what they should be. I mean, look at the agricultural industry in this country and other countries. I mean, look at, the fossil fuel industry. I mean, all of these we call enemies of a better world are being incentivized by governments. Isn't that crazy? Shouldn't it be reversed? And we can't just keep ignoring that, which we kind of are, aren't we? I mean, really. And so if governments can switch that, make that switch from incentivizing, renewable energy and incentivizing a new form of agriculture, which might be, some of the things that have been invented recently. That's going to help. But right now, it's kind of crazy. And now, I don't think we're facing that square and really identifying that as one of the major problems. That's a problem that's solvable. Just change the incentives.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for how to make it politically bulletproof, but I would say that, following on from the last comments, it's no surprise. I mean, for me, this is all just an addiction to borrowing problem. Like, we live in a monetary policy that's we're living with the repercussions of kind of an addiction to borrowing, and fundamentally, since at least
Is that on governments or is that on individuals or all of them?
I would say on governments and societies. I mean, obviously governments and individuals on the financial side. The broader point, though, is at least from the Industrial Revolution, that's fundamentally what's gotten us here from an environmental perspective. We're borrowing from the environmental future to pay for our economic present, and it's only now that, well, whatever analogy you want, the bills are coming due or interest rates are rising or whatever, but it's becoming very hard to pay our bills, and that, I do believe, will drive significant governmental policy change. It just will. That's kind of the physics of governments. It's not going to be a pretty way to do it, and so I don't know which way is going to win. Which kind of political philosophy is going to win. But I do know that solutions will be brought to the fore. I just don't think that those solutions are going to be, bipartisanly bulletproof. But I do believe that solutions will come, because solutions to overpowering always do, because there's constraints on societies, and there's constraints on economies, and there's constraints on ecosystems.
Very briefly, because I know we're running out of time, I am a full believer in the carrot and a stick process. And we have the carrots, critics or not, carbon credits are there and they're reeling in. And they are making the countries wake up to carbon sequestration and to reforestation and restoration of lands. And multilateral environmental agreements, unfortunately, have no teeth, except for one, CITES. And CITES has made the world change, including my government, who, if you can believe it, is the evil twin of Donald Trump. This guy is destroying the country and driving to extinction the vaquita, but when CITES shut down all international trade with CITES species, he started paying attention. And now Mexico is doing real things to protect the vaquita. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, Rodrigo, to talk about something just for 30 seconds quickly. You know, we talk a lot about working with industry. You've done that to protect bats with something very tasty. I was wondering if you could just talk about what you did with mezcal.
Well, this is a perfect place to do this. This is New York City. We have one of the programs that I've been creating over the past 10 years is bat-friendly tequila, my friends. Bat-friendly tequila. You know that tequila comes from these spiky plants that grow in the fields of Western Mexico for years and years and years, but they have not allowed a single plant to flower. The main pollinator of agaves is bats. Without bats, there's no agaves. So this is time. I'll be happy to talk to you later about this, but tonight, when you're celebrating, please ask for a good tequila, not a bad tequila, not an 818, not a celebrity tequila. Get a good tequila and toast bats first and foremost.
We are almost out of time, so I'm going to ask you each a very short answer. Let's say hypothetically we had the managing director of the Bezos Earth Fund in the room, hypothetically, right? And one of the team members. You have a chance to talk to Jeff Bezos directly, right? You have the chance to talk to one of the other supporters for coming in. What do you tell them? What investment should they be making?
That's a big question. I'd like to hear more about biodiversity credits, because there are some countries that have extraordinary biodiversity that are getting some of the least funding. And I think that that's got to change.
Yeah, this is maybe the specificity of the answer you want here, but it's what I would say to all these individuals, which is simply do whatever it is that you're actually passionate about. I think that we see so many people who rise to significant economic success based on something that they're passionate about and extremely skilled at, and then turn and try to take those resources and do something different with it. I think we need more people bringing the skills that they've brought to the business success that they've had to the environmental issues of today. If we had a little bit of more of that and a little less just general philanthropy with high net worth individual dollars, I think we'd be in a much better place.
And we know we have the director of sustainability of the Bezos Fund in attendance in this meeting, right? Yeah. So I think what I'm saying is the time for charity for biodiversity conservation is past. It's gone. It's over. It is time that we definitely make an ex professo creation of a specific tax and fund and resources, very significant resources, not the crumbs that we've been getting for decades, but really, because this is the life of the planet. What is riding in this is the life of the planet. So no charity, direct investment in empowering and connecting the global South.
What you have just said is really interesting. You know, Pat said we are incentivizing the wrong industries, the wrong places, the wrong others. And what you've just said is that nature is subsidizing us, right? It's time to actually really think about how we get the economics right. And I would ask you all, please thank this extraordinary panel. These are all people I deeply admire and respect. And thank you guys very much for doing this.